thank you for joining our webinar this afternoon. Before I hand you over to our moderator today, I will just share some key information points. All attendees today have entered the webinar muted, so if you would like to ask a question, you can do so through the questions box that you will see in the control panel. The speakers today will answer questions during our discussion after the presentations. Finally, the webinar is being recorded, so if you would not like your name to be read aloud when asking a question, please indicate this alongside the question that you write in the questions box. Now I will hand you over to our moderator for the day, Mr. Tomás Llobet.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to welcome you to this webinar today. My name is Tomás Llobet. I'm the Managing Director of Esmig. Esmig is one of the 3 associations next to Europacable and T&D Europe co-hosting this webinar today. I will, however, put off my hat as Managing Director of the association and be here your moderator today. And it will be my pleasure also to guide you through the agenda and present you our speakers today. I think we have a very interesting topic, maybe just to have a couple of words at the beginning. We all know Europe is, of course, a leader when it comes to decarbonization with ambitious targets for 2030 and the objective to reach climate neutrality by 2050. But we also need a strong industry, both products and services, to support this transformation. Europe is not only very ambitious when it comes to its climate and energy agenda and the green transformation of the industry, but also in providing the solutions for this transformation. And it's important that Europe keeps this leadership also at a global level. I think we have 3 very interesting examples here from 3 associations which sort of manufacture and serve this energy transition, and it will be very interesting, I think, for everyone to listen to the examples and showcases and also the key messages that the associations will provide. And before that, we will have the pleasure of having with us Vincent Berrutto, our keynote speaker today. And maybe we can have a quick look at the agenda. So we have first, as I just mentioned, Vincent. Thank you for being here with us today. Vincent Berrutto is the head of unit Research, Innovation, Competitiveness, Digitalisation at DG ENER at the European Commission. So this is a very wide portfolio, and I think one that's also very interesting for all the associations which are here. Innovation, competitiveness, this is really at the heart of what we do, and of course also digitalization with the upcoming digitalization in the energy sector action plan, which is also, you're also responsible for that very important initiative next year. Just maybe quickly to introduce Vincent. He was previously head of the energy unit at the European Commission's Executive Agency for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises, ESME, and prior to joining ESME, he worked on sustainable energy issues for many years in different services in the Commission, as well as also for the French government. Then I would like to introduce and welcome Christopher Guerin, who's the president of Europacable. Christopher, it's great to have you here with us. He has held several senior management positions at Nexans, a global company in the cable and optical fiber industry, headquartered in France since 2005, and is the company's CEO since July 2018. Then our next speaker, and I welcome you, Yann, is Yann Fromont, president of T&D Europe. Yann has been working at Schneider Electric, a French headquartered multinational company in energy and automation, digital solutions for efficiency, sustainability for about 12 years, and is the vice president, standardization, industry affairs strategy at Schneider Electric. And then, of course, last but not least, Mojca, welcome, and I'm very happy to have you here as the chair of the Regulatory and Policy Group of Esmig and the Fair Competition Task Force. Mojca is Director of Sustainability and Regulatory Affairs at Iskra-Emeco. where she's been working for over 6 years, and it's a company based in Slovenia, offering complete smart metering solutions, a wide portfolio to respond to the needs of utilities and consumers for efficient energy management. So thank you for being here with us today, and I would then like to give the floor to Vincent from the European Commission to begin his presentation. Vincent, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tomás, and good afternoon, everyone. I've been invited to be with you today to present a report that we've recently published. But let me say in introduction that I'm very happy to be here participating to this discussion on the contribution of EU industries to the objective of the Green Deal, and that webinar is quite timely. It takes place a few days after the COP26, and in a context where Europe and where rest of the world are experiencing a surge in energy prices. And I think the need to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 is a no-brainer. We must ensure, of course, that the energy transition leads to growth and jobs in Europe, and this is why the Commission prepared this report to track progress on the competitiveness of clean energy technologies. So the report was adopted on the 26th of October, at the same time as the State of the Energy Union report. It is the second report of this kind, and we had the first edition last year. It is a report made of two parts. We've got a first part which looks at the overall energy sector and provides a macroeconomic analysis. And then we have a second part of that report which focuses on key technologies. And this year we focused on 7 technologies that are wind, PV, heat pumps, batteries, hydrogen, renewable fuels for aviation and shipping, and smart grids technology, which is why I'm here today. So let me highlight a few interesting findings of the report, starting with the general results and then focusing on smart grids. So that's what you see on that slide here. I must say this the report this year is released after 20 months of pandemics. But according to the International Energy Agency, renewables have been less affected worldwide by the COVID-19 crisis than other energy sources. The only exception are biofuels from transportation, which were impacted more severely since the consumption declined. But for the rest, there's been a certain resilience. And in fact, for the first time in the European Union, renewables overtook fossil fuels as the EU main power source in 2020. And you know that the Commission put forward a recovery package, and the recovery measures that have been put in place will further boost the uptake of clean energy technologies. We've done an analysis here in the Commission of the 22 recovery and resilience plans that were adopted so far, and that shows that about 177 billion euro have been allocated to climate-related investments. So that's a considerable amount of money that will go to the green transition. And these are investments in a sector that for years now has been a driver for growth and jobs. If we look at the numbers, the latest figures that we have, which date back from before the pandemic, direct employment in clean energy had reached 1.7 million in Europe, with an average annual growth of 2%, while the employment in the overall economy, if we look at the overall economy, was only growing on average by 1% a year. So that shows how much these the clean energy sector act as a driver. If we look at the gross value added of that sector, it was progressing by 5% a year, while progress of the overall economy was only 3%. Next slide, please. to remain competitive, of course, in clean energy, it is important to keep investing in research and innovation. So where do we stand there? And this is what we try to show on that slide with the two graphs, which you see on the right-hand side. What we see is that after the 2008 economic crisis, public investments in clean energy research and innovation went into a decline, and they only showed signs of recovery after 2016. And since 2016, the EU member states have invested on average 3.5 billion euro per year, but spending is still lower than the one of a decade ago. And we have not kept pace with the increase in the GDP. So if you look at the public spending as a share of the GDP, which is what you see on the top right corner of that slide, the EU is on the left side in blue. Then you see that the EU investment rate is the lowest of all major global economies, just below the US. Now, if we look at the private sector and private investments in the Energy Union research and innovation priorities, again, as a share of the GDP, and now this is the graph on the bottom right corner of this slide, they're above the US, but lower than Japan, Korea, and China. That said, the European Union has a greater share of green inventions in overall patent filings compared to other major economies, and it continues to host a quarter of the top 100 companies in high-value patents in clean energy over the last 5 years. I think we've worked very well with our colleagues from the Joint Research Center who have data on number of patents, and they helped us analyze the trends in the in using that indicator as an indicator of innovation. And what is worth highlighting also is and quite positive, I must say, is the fact that the EU leads when it comes to high value inventions in renewables energy efficiency. So we're quite good at research. I mean, that's the conclusion that of that report. If we go to the next slide then, and we seem to be having a problem of display. I hope it can be resolved. Let me continue while the technicians are trying to fix that problem. Or it's perhaps only me who has this problem. No, I don't think so. Okay, so you can see other people having the same problem. So we're going back to that slide. I think it's an interesting one because it also shows a graph, which I would want you to see. Well, here we are. So in this year's report, we added a new chapter on venture capital, VC, where we report that in 2020, the startups in the EU only captured 8% of the global VC funding, and that this share went up to 16% if we only look at the climate tech domain. So that shows that EU startups are kind of specializing in that domain, but still the share going to European startups is rather small. At the same time, and that is more positive, 2020 was the first year where early stage investments in EU climate startups were higher than those in the US and China. That's what you see on the graph on the right-hand side. What is less positive, of course, is that the EU-based climate tech startups still trail their counterparts in their ability to scale. And the total investments in those still range far behind the US, for example. This, of course, is very challenging for the EU because that is preventing us from reaping the competitiveness benefits of EU innovation, and is sometimes leading promising ventures to move to the US or Asia to reach scale. Therefore, our report is very much on the need to dedicate more efforts to bridge the gap between the lab and the market, and to make best use of all the new instruments that exist at EU level, in particular under the Horizon Europe program. And that comment is valid for all the technologies that we've been focusing on. Now, the report also contains a lot of findings and data that are more specific to each technologies. And I don't have time to cover them all, of course, this afternoon, but let me give you the example in the field of smart grids. So if we move to the next slide. Yeah, in the field of smart grids, we focused this year on 4 technologies, which are distribution grid automation, smart metering, home energy management systems, and smart EV charging. Compared to the other technologies that we've looked at, you remember we've looked at wind, solar, etc. This part of the report was more challenging because the information was less available and more scattered. And I would really like to thank those of you who contributed by providing data specific to their sector of activities. This has been extremely valuable, I think in particular of Esmig, for instance. So with these data in hand, we reported that distribution, automation, and smart metering can rely on mature devices and software whose deployment has been ongoing for a decade now. For instance, by the end of last year in 2020, almost 150 million smart meters were present in the EU, Norway, Switzerland, and UK, and this number is expected to grow to almost 215 million by 2025. With the second wave technology focusing more on decentralization and services to consumers. On the other hand, home energy management systems and smart charging are in early take-up, and our value chain analysis showed that there is a strong fragmentation among many players, especially when we look at the sector of smart charging and home energy management systems, where we see new players, aggregators, and tech companies appearing recently. In distribution automation, some European companies are present in the full value chain, and they are represented today and are significant global players, while for smart metering, value chains seem to be dominated by regional players. The case of EV charging infrastructure is particularly interesting. There we see that the supply chain of manufacturers is mainly local and regional, and in particular for EU-based vendors. The basic electronic parts are purchased in Asia, and the market and value chain are now fully mature, not fully mature yet, and the market is expected to grow fast, especially in the slow charging part that will be bigger than the fast charging one. If we move to the next slide, we see a bit more information about the smart grids chapter of our report. What we see is that, in fact, as I said, the global market for EV charging infrastructure and platforms is the one that is expected to grow the fastest in the next decade, with a compound annual growth rate of 26%. Is expected to pass from a market of a bit less than 1 billion euro in 2020 to close to 7 billion euro by 2030. In comparison to the other 3 technologies, it's far bigger. The other 3 technologies have growth rates close to 10%. In absolute value, though, our global market is far larger. If you take smart meter market, for instance, it's expected to come close to 40 billion euro US dollar in 2027, due mainly to growth in Asia. And for the home energy management systems, which you also see on that slide, the market should reach around 12 billion US dollar in 2028, which is nearly 3 times more than in 2019. The European Union is in a good position to capture part of these markets, although one may expect more competition, especially from Asia, Pacific, and the US. Now, how do we keep our competitiveness and at the same time maximize the benefits of our technologies? That's a question we are asking ourselves, and we are currently preparing an action plan, which Tomás mentioned, on the digitalization of the energy sector. And that action plan, reflection on that action plan has started, and we've had contacts with many stakeholders. We hope to have something ready by the first semester of next year. And I think I've got another slide which shows a little bit what our plan is. Yes, thank you. So the plan will aim at exploiting digital solutions to make our energy system cleaner, more secure, more competitive, and present an overview of a set of actions to promote digitalization. So we envisage 5 main areas of intervention, which you see on that slide here. First, developing a European data sharing infrastructure to facilitate the access and exchange of energy data between products and between market actors. That will, of course, be useful for TSO, DSOs, but also new market actors entering the market, possibly. A second area of intervention concerns the empowerment of consumers, looking at how digitization can support their engagement in energy markets and what must be done to preserve their rights and increase their digital skills. The third area is about enhancing the uptake of digital technologies in the energy sector, both on the supply side, but also on the demand side, in a way that generates growth and jobs. And fourth, we will be looking at the other side of the coin. What must be done to ensure cybersecurity and data protection? So we're working closely here with our colleagues dealing with the security of energy supply. And finally, fifth and last part, the plan will cover measures to reduce the carbon footprint of ICT solutions, meaning measures that increase energy efficiency, reuse waste heat, promote the use of renewable energy sources, and so on. So we have an open public consultation published now. It's open until the 24th of January. We want to get the views of stakeholders and I encourage you to reply. I think I've come to the end of my allocated time, so I'll finish with one last slide, which gives you some conclusions which are general to the Competitiveness Progress Report. Well, first of all, the EU is a front runner when it comes to clean energy research. That's very clear. I mentioned a few figures in introduction. However, what we see clearly is that we need to dedicate further efforts to increase public investments in research and innovation and further mobilize private finance, in particular, to help innovators move from innovation to market and scale up. That's very important. These challenges are being tackled in the new policies on climate, energy, and industry, as well as in the new financial framework. We've got an unprecedented budget now to stimulate innovation in clean energy. On our side, at DG Energy, we remain committed to monitor the impact of these measures on the competitiveness of clean energies, and we are now starting reflecting on the next year's report that we will publish around October next year. And one aspect we would like to develop further are trade issues, and I understand that this is an issue that the next panel will discuss at length. So I'm looking forward to listening to the next speakers from industry and taking notes of all their comments and suggestions. Thank you very much. Tomás, back to you.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Thank you for this very interesting presentation. And we all know, of course, the report and also the 5 staff documents are on your website. Many pages long, so this was an excellent way of summarizing the key findings. And I would also just want to add very encouraging words that in the next progress report, you will also look a little bit more at the global level, trade issues, and I think without wanting to say anything that will be interesting here in the debate today, but also the absence of the level playing field is also having an impact, of course, on competitiveness. So this is also something that even beyond trade will probably also something interesting to analyze. So thank you very much, Vincent. We can then start with the presentations from the 3 associations. We'll start with Christopher Guerin, President of Europacable. Again, a pleasure, Christopher. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Tomás. Can you hear me well?
We hear you well. Excellent.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you to give us this opportunity to introduce Europacables. You know, we are very, very passionate teams and players around the cable sectors. Nobody knows how much dependent you are from cables on fiber optic in your daily life. You know, our industry has started with Edison, Tesla, Westinghouse, all these pioneers of electricity and as well telecom that requires cables to convey the electricity or convey the data. So what is Europacable first, before what we do? So it's, of course, an association that covers all the European companies and world leaders. So it's all the names that you see below that are providing a scope of full range of energy and communication cable, and that they do represent today 80,000 employees, around 620 factories in Europe, and it's about 70 billion euro turnover. On the next page, what do? We are everywhere in the market. First of all, we are building. If you can click, Lena, we are building the European networks of tomorrow, and we're just at the beginning of a huge electrical revolution, and I will talk about it. Of course, there is the shift from fossil fuel, like Mr. Berrutto mentioned, to renewable, that will generate a complete new market for the European leader that we are. We are connecting Europe citizens and business thanks to cable LAN on fiber optic on all the data networks. It's thanks to our products that we are able to move from 2G, 3G, 4G on ready to engage the next step of the 5Gs. And of course, we are shifting our product standards. For example, in building, we are now in replacing PVC cables everywhere in Europe by HFFR type cables that are fire resistant, because maybe you do not know that, but we have a fire in buildings and house every 2 minutes in the world. And of course, we are preparing the electrification of transport, either trains, electrical vehicle charging stations, on electrical vehicles, and of course, fully engaged to reduce the CO2 footprint. So what is the challenge? Next page on the for our industry. First of all, it's about decarbonization. It's about decarbonization, and we are everywhere on the electrification ecosystem. And if I did say that we are the beginning of a huge electrical revolution that will have exactly the same magnitude in terms of investment that what happens in the world post-World War II between 1950 to 1970, where we set up the fossil fuel generation of electricity on all the power grid network and as well the telecom network at that time, which is now time to replace globally everywhere. First, on the generation of electricity, if you click on the document here, Lena, first on the generation of electricity, we need to migrate from fossil fuel that represents still 80% of the electricity generation to renewable. So we will have to install by 2030 more than 45,000 kilometers of HVDC submarine cable to connect big countries together, but as well offshore wind farm. For the offshore wind farm, we are talking about 200 gigawatts. So 200 gigawatts, just to give you an example, it's equivalent of a 200 nuclear reactor. So the world will deploy 200 gigawatts. On just for Europe, we are talking about 70 to 90 gigawatts to be deployed by 2030. And of course, we need to connect this offshore wind farm to the grid, and we tried massive amounts of cable. Last but not least, we need that as well at the land part, because we need to convey the electricity through all countries, in France, in Germany, in Italy, everywhere in Europe, and it's about 14,000 kilometers of HVDC that will have to be deployed to convert this electricity and to renew the power grid. And it's the same at medium voltage level, because you maybe don't know, but most of the cables that are underground, the cities have been installed in that period of 50 and 70. They were supposed to have a lifespan of 30 years, and now we reach 40 to 50 years of lifespan. So we are at the risk of major power outages in cities and as well blackouts. So that's why we need massive investment to really modernize and fortify each nation power grid. On the next slide, double click, Lena. Thank you. It's of course the telecom. we can say that the telecom compared to energy operators have really taken the lead on replacing telecom backbone. You know, in the 80s, there were copper LAN cables everywhere in the world that allow us to move from 1G to 2G for mobile network. But because of digitalization, because of our willingness to do this fantastic virtual conference like we are doing since 2 years everywhere in the world with very high level of quality, we have been able strongly since more than 10 years in all European countries to replace copper LAN cables by leading edge fiber optic networks that really allow us to make those virtual events in a very high quality. So there is still massive investments to come in the optical fiber perimeter because we need to reinforce the backbone infrastructures and we need to get ready for smart cities that will require 5Gs every 10 meters in each street. So a fantastic digital decade in front of us to further invest. Now to talk about, of course, fair competition. Next page, thank you. We have fantastic industry. I think you understand by my comment that we are supporting huge electrical revolution and a huge digital revolution. We are technology leaders here in Europe. We are providing top quality, high quality products ready for the next decade. We are massively investing in Europe to drive this innovation, and we comply, of course, to the highest standards, and they keep growing every 5 years. Our companies are fully committed to sustainability, and of course, we keep investing in people and the talent. So, of course, we love competition. We love competition when it's being fair. And to be honest, since years, our association is fighting like hell on the telecom part to really fight against unfair dumping on subsidy practice. I cannot do best than what happening this morning, just before this virtual conference, Tomás, because we are very happy since this morning 8 o'clock to welcome the official imposition of anti-dumping duties on import on optical fiber from China. Today, 9 o'clock, the European Commission imposed anti-dumping duties between 19% up to 44% on all imports from optical fiber from China. So, of course, we are welcoming this measure. The strongly subsidized Chinese optical fiber industry has benefited from really, in our view, unfair competitive advantage, allowing it to increase significant export. More than 40% of the import of Europe were coming from China, with massive undercut prices in the last 4 years. So, of course, could not be better with my message. We are very happy. It was a long process of more than 4 years. So now we will follow as a Europacable the right implementation of those measures, and of course it will now fix this unfair dumping situation that we as cable manufacturers suffer since more than 4 years. So we are reestablishing a very fair competition to secure the European telecom backbone, but of course it will be a precedent potentially for other cases that can come in the energy sectors. So voila, in few words, what is Europacable? What is our challenge for energy transition on telecom revolution? On fantastic news that just arrived this morning, could not be better. We are waiting for it since more than a year. Thank you, Tomás.
Thank you very much, Christopher. Thank you for your presentation and for sharing these news with us. And as you said, the timing couldn't have been better. And it's also good to see that they're good news, and it's also good to see that Europe is taking action, because I think this is one of the things that we will also continue discussing today. What are we expecting also from the EU in taking action when it comes to unfair practices, subsidies, dumping, etc. So thank you very much. A very good example, great timing. And then I would like to hand over to Yann Fromont, the president of T&D Europe. Yann, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tomás. So let's start also by a short introduction. In fact, when you have cable, and Christopher was right, you need to distribute the electricity to our life, because now our life is clearly depending from electricity, whatever it is, including internet, including the car and all the industry. So we need also to protect the people in the industry. So we talk normally about circuit breaker, transformer, and that's what is doing T&D Europe. We are an association of different associations. You see, you recognize certainly some names: Gimelec from France, BIMA from the UK, ZVI from Germany. And we mix also SME and large group, as mentioned by Vincent. In our activity, we have large group, but also we have many SME in different countries. So you have the large group below, and what do we do? In fact, we do high voltage and medium voltage, or transmission and distribution equipment. By equipment, in fact, we were talking about, as I say, switch gear, circuit breaker, transformer, but more and more automation, of course, to make the smart grid, more and more software to analyze and to predict and to anticipate the full uncertainty we are living at the moment, and more services in order to have more circularity, to have more anticipation, and to reduce the cost of the grid. So it's a mix of what we do, of what we summarize by the Green Deal, a Green Deal which is green but really efficient and reliable. If you look at the next one, in fact, we were really active on the Green Deal from the beginning. Because we all our group we represent are believing in the carbon neutrality. So each of our group step by step declares that carbon neutrality, but 2050 for us was a bit long. So clearly we were even more active on the 55. Why? Because we believe that if we don't move now, 2050 will be too far away. So we believe more in 2030 and the action we have now. We believe in digital transformation. That's why we'll come back on it. But often we cannot still invest purely on hardware. We need still let's say the hardware, but we need to have the layer of automation. Otherwise, it will never be a smart grid. And maybe a smart grid is not enough. Smart grid is a word that we use for some years now. Now I believe we are more in active grid. The difference is that we need to move on real time now, real-time process, to be reactive between what we see in terms of power generation, weather forecast, everything change in terms of power generation, but everything changed as well on the side of the consumer. We saw it with the COVID. People were working at home, and it changed again the electricity scheme. I have some millennials in my family. Clearly, they consume more at night than I do. So let's say by this joke that the power gen, we often focus on the power gen, the weather forecast, the solar, but I would say the consumption is clearly changing, and we see it every day. So active grid for me is more the world. Real-time software, it should be the investment. The switchgear are still there, but they should be motorized, certainly more IoT and more clever. So there's a change of paradigm in the investments that we perceive. When we talk about that, we come to data. And the data should be interoperable, and European Commission understood very well that. In the standards, we work a lot in the Sensenelec, IEC, etc., in the different region, and we work on interoperability. The big difference we perceive at the moment is that in the past we were working by interoperability per sector. Now we see with the data that it's a cross sector, And if I take the example of Vincent of EV charging, EV car, etc., in fact, it's clearly the case. It's no more the automotive to decide. It's no more the charger and the startup mentioned that decide. It's no more the grid to decide. It's no more the building because you charge in the building. In fact, it's a real decision across sector. And that's where the difficulty starts. Because each sector would like to impose their protocols, their way to think, etc. It's interesting for the industry like us because we are neutral. T&D Europe is neutral. We work in generation, in power plants, in wind farm, in solar, in nuclear power plant. We work in grids, high voltage, medium voltage. We work in building, in industry. We have our switch gear or protection inside. We are a bit everywhere and we see the different sectors trying to talk, and we support that. But we see that clearly that it's, let's say, a point of attention because it's not easy to, at the moment, to make it happen. And if it doesn't happen, it means the business will not be fluent. Resilience for the grid, as mentioned by Christopher, it's clear. Huh? If you have no more the cable, the breaker, the grid, the life stop. It's clear. Employment, I believe it's a battle. Huh? The Green Deal, the COVID, the recovery plan, etc. The real battle is around the employment and the green employment. That's why I like what Vincent presented, because here we talk about innovation if you want to be ready in 5 or 10 years. So the battle is also on employment, and our industry is moving to green process and circularity. Sustainable finance is important for us. Why? Because as mentioned, for me, the public investment are the initiator, the initiation of something. But in reality, the scale-up is coming from the industry, the sustainable finance, the private. I have a few numbers because we mentioned already, Vincent mentioned already the EV charger, but I saw numbers because we like numbers at the moment, but in 2030, they say like a country like UK or France should have 12 million of charger, which is fine, enough to make it happen. 500,000 will be public. Let's say 12 million will be private. So it's clear that the association of finance and private is key. European Commission, national entity cannot make it happen. So that's where also we need this, I will come back on it, but this green finance and taxonomy to support the private investment. Circular economy for me is key and it's close to digitization. So I say we invest a lot because electricity, we talk more and more of massive electricity dispatch, and we need to be ready. And as I say, it's not only a question of generation, it's a question of consumption and matching the two. So certainly we were global, we are coming to local. So now we need to check that really the puzzle is matching with the generation certainly close to the consumption to make it happen. And we come to a sentence from Vincent at the beginning where he say prosumer, and I agree, the emergence of prosumer is there, and we don't see it really happening in Europe at the moment. So we need to ensure that if we want to have something more efficient, cost, we talk about cost of energy at the moment a lot, but certainly if the production is close to the consumption, you have something more efficient. Of course, you need to keep the global one, but at least you can solve many problems locally. Next one. So how to solve it? For us, it's about efficiency. Huh? We need to reduce the cost to make optimize the network, the investment, make it properly, digitize to avoid all the uncertainty I mentioned before. All the uncertainty, we need to anticipate, plan, and decide. And it's about software, and I say real-time software connected to the ground, connected to the field, that the decision can be taken very fast. So we talk about flexibility, cybersecurity of the system, not only about the product. It could be product, package, system, because everything is made. Interconnection, As I say, it can start from local for local, but after you need to be interconnected to ensure some to ensure and to optimize what you do. So and then if we make it happen, it means the prosumer, so the smart building, the industry becoming decarbonized, etc., can be connected to the grid and can play with the grid by playing, as say, helping the grid to avoid peak, but also re-injected what they have produced as energy to the grid when it's required, when you have a peak, etc. So it's a demand response, the word. It's part of the story. So the grid code, the network code has been are being built, but it's still on the way. It's not done yet. So everything is for us about more self-healing, reactivity, and software connected to the switchgear, to the hardware we are installing. And then on the next one, we come to we come to the main words we like to use to make it happen. Again, efficiency and flexibility, decarbonization. So it's easy on hardware, but you can replace all the equipment per new one. It's easy to understand where in fact they are more efficient. So the real one is transformer. The modern transformer are having less losses, are efficient. So of course you don't waste your energy. You have also switchgear with different type of switchgear that also very much more efficient, circularity, repairing, refurbishing, etc. We push a lot on flexibility. Here we come again on automation and software to make the grid more flexible, because at the moment it's a bit rigid. So we need to have flexibility to integrate DER, so PV, but there is cloud, so you cannot integrate them really, etc., etc. So there's a big paradigm around this. Self-healing, because you need automatization. When there is a problem, you don't need the people to react to. You need to make it automatically, and the industry recover the electricity in a couple of microseconds or at home, etc., etc. So there's about automation and self-healing, what we call normally smart grid. Digitalization is more for us for prediction, anticipation. So it's about sensor, hardware, software again. And optimization is for us really to anticipate and to optimize the investment. Instead of working in reactivity, we believe that it's better with software to anticipate where the problem will occur, where we need to react, and maybe advise where we want more DR, where we want a bit less, in order to have really not more budget, more focused budget, let's say. It's a bit the wording we like. And finally, extending the network whenever needed, but at the right place that we have analyzed before. So let's say the booster of the recovery plan added to the Green Deal make a lot of money. So let's a bit reorganize and refocus on the investment. And on the last one, if I summarize, so it's more or better investment, let's say, for the grid. By the grid, as I say, we are in the private grid, in the industry, on the utility grid. So let's say they need more automation, as I say, more some line extension when required, more software, but real-time software, really reactiving. We need also investment, or investment we have, but a predictive investment. Otherwise, as I say, the private sector has difficulty to follow, because if we are not able to work on a return on investment, it's pretty difficult to invest, because the risk is not really visible. So we insist on the fact that for operator, and the regulation also should have a midterm, long-term, clearer, let's say, plan where really we know where we're going, and not only on capex, not only on, but really on totex, including the operations. Otherwise, circular economy will never happen. The last 3 points are more on what we see in manufacturing. Our factory are becoming more digital, of course, more circular because it comes from the design and the production. And our people are evolving, and they are evolving to services because what we believe is that circularity will bring services, different services, refurbish, remanufacture, reuse, etc., recycling at the end. And it's services, and it's important services because it will bring local jobs. So we are sure that in fact the job, the business created in Europe will remain also in Europe. So that's why we dispatch these services. It can be digital services, remote services, but at the end it's field services. Anyway, it's a duo between the two. But we are creating a lot of services at the moment through asset management, for instance. So maintaining the grid and maintaining the apparatus with service and life extension. We have an issue in raw materials. I believe it's clear. In different raw materials, metallic and semiconductor. We are securing also the supply chain at the moment with more Europe, but we have clearly a problem of raw material and price increase. And finally, as mentioned by Christopher, as soon as we make this Green Deal with new process, we need to ensure that everybody plays the game. So the market surveillance should be there and efficient, but not costly as well. It should not be also too much complexity and too much costly. So we need to find a way, certainly through standardization, Sensenelec or some other, in order to ensure that in this process we have this result and the market surveillance is easy, clear, and sanctions are also clear to avoid the people to bring a fake product in the market. So more or less, that was the idea we wanted to mention.
Thank you very much, Yann. Thank you for your presentation. And looking at the watch, I think we're a little bit slightly behind schedule, but still in time also for our discussion. But first, we'll have the pleasure to listen to the last presentation today. Mojca, please, the floor is yours to bring in Esmig's perspective.
Thank you very much, Tomás. It's my pleasure, dear gentlemen, to be here with you today to speak about the important issues of our industry. And congratulations to Mr. Guerin for the really important victory on the fair competition. I was really happy to receive your email today earlier. And also one other thing to congratulate you about is the quote that you closed your presentation with. You know, try live without us. A really perfect summarizing of the importance of the industry, of the importance of the technology and everything. So for now, a few words about Esmig, as I'm a representative of Esmig. Esmig is a European association representing smart energy solution providers. And we as a members, we provide products and information technology and services for multi-commodity metering and for the display and management of this energy consumption and production on consumer premises. Our solutions, they measure, they exchange and process relevant energy-related data in a reliable, really, and safe communication chain, yeah? So all these components, they enable better outage and network condition detection. They enable customized tariffs, which is one of the main issues, and accurate bills and precise monitoring of consumption and demand. And all this with an important aim, of course, to make energy cleaner, more affordable, and more reliable. And we all know, all of us here, and it's really beautiful how we're going to present a lot of the energy flow, actually. We all know that there's a really important decade ahead of us with many issues to be rising in all those important points. So if we go through the numbers of Esmig, well, the total revenue is of nearly 200 billion. If we look at the number of employees, our industry in Europe is covering more than 300,000 employees, and we have a really huge global reach into 180 countries, and of course all the European countries are also here. And in Europe there's 240 production facilities in our industry. So this is who we're representing. In Lena, if we move to the next slide, this is just a slide showing basically who are our members that I'm representing today, and a beautiful square flow of what we're providing. So if we start here with the smart on the right side with the smart meters that are providing data, and it goes into flows. The first one, the lower one, is the flow for the data for billing and grid management, and the upper is data for energy management. And then with providing additional services, we have data for the commercial services and energy market data. Yeah. And if we move to the next slide, Lena, please. So all of you has already mentioned, and we cannot even talk without mentioning this big elephant that we have in the room that's called decarbonization, and that's called our Green Deal objectives, our strategic missions that we need to achieve as a community, I want to say, as a technology, as an economy, and as a community. Yeah. So Esmig members have an important role in this journey, and this is also why we think we have important responsibilities. So, of course, the EU really aims to guarantee accessible, affordable, secure, and competitive and sustainable energy for the Europeans. And we want to be climate neutral by 2050. And I'm a director of sustainability working on those things for more than 20 years. And I'm telling you now, it's really the moment. Yeah, this is what we have. We're really missing. We don't even have 10 years anymore. We only have 9 years, and we have the challenges of 50 years. So this is what we're faced with. Yeah. So 75% of the CO2 emissions in Europe is due to energy demand at the moment. Yeah, and energy is growing. Energy demand is growing, and energy is being electrified. So this is where we are at the moment. So now our vision is really to have and to enable a safe and strategically independent green and digital transition that really fully empowers consumers and enables energy efficiency throughout actionable insights from the technologies that we have. And this is what we want to achieve with two, and this is, I want to stress out two important bullets, two important lines. The first one is that we need to still build trust in these new energy technologies and empower consumers, because that has been already written down decade and more than decade ago and should be in place by now, but we have not done it as Europe. So there is not high trust enough in these new technologies, and this is also why we don't have the results of that. So this is something we would like, and this is one of our important missions. So we really want to empower consumers in displaying a really active role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, because one is the technologies that are available, and the second thing is the communities that need to use these technologies. Otherwise, we will not achieve anything. And then if I move to the second one, we want to secure Europe's international leadership and I say strategic autonomy in this dual green and digital transition. And this is really important because we are part of the mission critical infrastructures. And I will say a few more words later on about that. So Lena, if we can please move to our next slide. As I would like to really describe a situation that we have at the moment. So us European companies are really increasingly facing unfair competition from third country producers in EU market. Okay, there's many different practices and they're not regulated, and they're difficult to prove by us and difficult to be fought on our shoulders only. There's this specific issue in the context of the public procurement for the national rollouts and solutions of smart meters in particular, and that has also been recognized by the European Commission, which is really great. There is an issue of subsidies granted by the non-EU governments to companies competing in the single market. Yeah. So there is an absence of a true international level playing field. There is an European international level playing field among us, the European market holders. Yes, but when being approached from the non-European market players, there is no fair level playing field. Yeah, the situation is really distorting, the fair competition and really undermining the principles that the single market is built upon and that we're all proud so much on. Yeah. So we've been analyzing with our members what's going on and what are the risks and what's the negative consequences out of this situation. And I would really like to highlight a few of them to you. So Lena, please. So 3 of them first. The first one is safety of this mission critical infrastructure. So smart meters control the flow of energy throughout Europe. And as they're connected and can be remotely controlled, this is the single entry point of possible remote attacks on smart meters, and with that remote attacks on the energy grids and everything. And this needs to be maintained and really secured. And this is one of the main responsibilities that we have as consultants to everybody investing into the grids of being this high importance. Then the second one, we see risk of compromising Europe's strategic autonomy. Depending on non-EU technology and solution providers, it can have serious consequences for this complex value chain in our sector. And to once again, or to highlight even more, the third one, the third risks that we want to stress out is data security and safety issues. We all know, and we've been talking about with you today, that okay, we were talking about smart grids, and now we have active grids, meaning on the real data. And I would say we need to have intelligent grids. Yeah. And why? Of course, for the successful green and digital transition to decarbonize. That's to achieve all possible layers and levels of energy efficiency. But to succeed in this transition, it means that we're depending on the quality of data that's gathered and the data that's transmitted. Yeah, and compromises of this data can really impact privacy and safety of European citizens. And this is also why they don't have trust as high as they should in the use of all these technologies. And this is why, because not using these technologies doesn't give you opportunities to achieve all the energy optimization and energy efficiencies that you have. So there's 3 more risks that I would really like to highlight to you. Lena? Okay. One is risk of really technology deficit and dependence on other regions. We've all experienced this terrible COVID crisis and all the situations, and there's really one thing that we need to learn from that. So global autonomy and independence in energy is a strategic, and it needs to be a social political must as well. And from this COVID crisis, we need to learn that to be resilient, it's really important. And to be strategically independent is building your resilience. Yeah. Then I would like to mention one of the risks that was already mentioned here before: risk of unemployment. risk of unemployment by not having fair chances to do business in the market. We've seen industries being wiped out of the European markets because we were not paying attention to the dumping prices of non-EU countries and so on and so on. And to do this risk, I would also like to add the social responsibility aspect and environmental requirements. It's just not fair to leave all the negative consequences of the industry and everything to some other players in other countries. It's our responsibility. We need to have the same measures, the same requirements for everybody in Europe. European economy needs to become socially responsible. It needs to be decarbonized, and it's not only the carbon emissions, it's also all the other negative impacts of the environmental issues that we have. And then the last risk that I would like to mention is a really risk of losing this global leadership in energy infrastructure and smart energy solution. Because now Europe we see as a worldwide leader and a standard setter in this innovative industry. And if things continue as they do, this is not going to be the case anymore. And I know that this is one of the main strategies and main objectives of Europe, being the best, being the front leader in the green and digital transition. Because our industry is basically a key enabler in this cost-efficient and dual green and digital transition. So based on all these risks that we've analyzed, that we've experienced, and we're fighting with on our own, based on all of that, we've decided last year to come up with a document with a position paper on those things, calling for the fair competition in the energy industry. And there's a few things that I would like to highlight out of this document. These are asks, requests from our side, some urgent calls to the European Commission, what's needed. So there's a few things. One is we really need to maintain and create and keep to safety of these mission critical infrastructures. We need to be really careful with data and privacy. We need to have on board on all the bids and businesses, corporate social responsibility requirements and environmental requirements, the same high ones for everybody. And we wish to have accountability of the buyers for all of that. Well, the competition rules, overall, what we want is competition rules that ensure fair level playing field for EU and for non-EU competitors. Like already mentioned, there's fair level playing field for EU among EU competitors, but not EU against non-EU. And this is what we're fighting for. And this is why we've established and written this position paper and are communicating this position paper throughout the whole year now. And Lena, if we can move to my final slide. European Commission is moving and it's working on these issues. And one of the things is a regulation on the foreign subsidies distorting the internal market, which is a really very important legislative proposal. And we were involving in the consultation and in propositions from our side and trying to also send to the European Commission issues and clear cases and everything, but this is only part of the solution. We do need additional tools. So in this document, in this proposition of the regulation, the notification-based tool is to investigate bids in public procurement that are involving financial contribution by a non-EU government, applies only when the estimated value of the procurement is higher than 250 million. And for all our industries, and also for the similar industries, this is too high. So with having in mind all the risks that I was just before explaining, we have proposed another criteria. So we really think there needs to be a dual criteria, not only the financial value of the bids, but also the mission critical infrastructure value, because this is strategically important for also the safety of our countries. There are some unpleasant things that we don't like to talk about in this context, but we all know mission critical infrastructures have an important meaning. And we are well aware of this ex officio procedure that is the solution basically for our sector in this proposal of the regulation. But this procedure it's not formal, so it's informal. Of course, it can be anonymized and everything, but it needs uptake by the economic operators. So it means it pushes all the responsibility to us, that we're the ones becoming the troublemakers, saying everything and so on. And also, if investigated and if concluded into our advantage, let's say there's no real consequence. So the business has been done and will be done. There's maybe, let's say, some guidelines for the future. Yeah. And we, once again, we really think it's great proposition and everything, but it's not, it's only solving really part of the solution. And we do need additional tools to be able to mitigate the risks that I was mentioning before. And with this, I would conclude my part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mojca. Thank you for your presentation and also explaining, I think, something that we all remember, that in the clean energy sector there were industries in Europe that were almost, I will use this word even if it sounds a bit brutal, wiped out from Europe, as we all remember, with the solar panel saga. And also there was an anti-dumping, anti-subsidy case which did not end as well, probably for that industry, which was one where Europe was leading and where we all know that today and exporting, Europe is highly dependent also on imports on these panels. So this is, I think, is a good example here, where we see that also, despite the targets that we have in Europe and despite the fact that we're leading in this clean tech industry, in the clean energy solutions, and also in the dual digital and green transition, industries remain at risk. And we have seen here a very good example from one industry which is really looking at these risks and already experiencing them. And also Christopher has given a good example that battles are being fought, and sometimes maybe not the war, but the battles are won. And this is also very encouraging. It's also encouraging to see that the European Commission plays a role there. So I would like to stop here now and invite participants to ask questions. Also, it would maybe be interesting to see whether the three panelists have some questions for Vincent, or Vincent, whether you have any specific questions also to our panelists. And in the meantime, again, invite also the audience through the chat to put out some questions to the speakers so we can collect them. And we have a bit less than 20 minutes left for the discussion, but please keep the questions coming. And in the meantime, I invite the speakers to interact and maybe ask each other some questions. And if you don't have any questions, I'm also happy to ask some questions to you. And I would actually maybe have a question starting with Christopher. But this is a question I think that also everyone could answer, is if we look a bit beyond Europe and we see also other large economic regions in the world pushing for decarbonization, although if we have Glasgow in mind, maybe we see some regions pushing more for decarbonization than others. But still, we see this very strong global trend. And it would be interesting to see also when we've heard from everyone today, and also Vincent has shown quite interesting figures here on the opportunities and challenges this can also offer to European companies. So not only the drive for decarbonization, for example, in Europe, but globally. And so that's something that would be maybe interesting to hear from you, but also at the same time, not only looking beyond Europe, but also looking a bit into the future. Where do you think European companies empowering, or let's say supporting this drive for decarbonization, will they all survive in the next 5 to 10 years? And I think maybe some of you are a bit more optimistic, others maybe a bit more gloomy. But what needs to be put in place to secure a future for the European industry to decarbonize, not only in Europe, but globally in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, thank you, Thomas, for that great question. I think it's a fundamental question, but I think we should not be shy. In regards to energy transition, decarbonation, new technologies in telecoms and energy, for me, Europe is leading the way. You know, I'll give you an example. I was in US last week. You know, we are today implementing wind offshore farm thanks to all the knowledge that we gained in Europe in the last 10 years. US is able to go very fast in offshore wind farm deployment, supported by European companies only, because we've learned a lot in the last 10 years with everything we've done in North Europe and in UK. And it's the same on telecom. The only, I think what matters for me is that we should be careful in Europe not to spend too much time into debate, into reflection, and to have a global call for action. Because maybe we are certainly leaders in many aspects, but China is waking up, US is waking up, and start to pump a lot of our resources, knowledge, and capacity to support their demand. And I hope that one day Europe will not wake up to say, now let's start to implement all these things and I would say, go faster. The situation could be that all European leaders are stuck by some commitment in US and in China to support the demand. And I want to come back to Mr. Berrutto's comment regarding securing raw material. Let me give you a concrete example from our industry. We have modelized the demand of copper from 1995 to 2030. I will give you 3 numbers. The copper consumption in the world in 1995 was about 9 million tons per year. All sectors together, 9 million tons per year. 25 years later, in 2020, the world consumed 20 million tons of copper. So within 25 years, the amount doubled. What is the model showing us for the next 9 to 10 years only, 9 to 10 years only, is that the copper consumption will move from 20 million tons to 35 million tons. Why? Because all the world at the same time, and this never happened before, is either deploying its power grid, new carbon-free generation electricity, or just renewing what they have installed in the last 50 years. So this is the first time in the next 10 years that the world will double its requirement in terms of raw material. On copper and aluminium are 2 critical elements that if we do not secure our capacity in the future, we will miss raw material. The demand will be there, the willingness to deploy carbon-free energy will be there, but we will lack raw material. So of course, safeguard our technology, like Mojca said, is fundamental in Europe. Safeguard our jobs, safeguard our units on manufacturing is fundamental, but as well, secure the upstream. Secure the upstream in terms of raw material to follow this fantastic demand in front of us.
Vincent, I see you want to comment. Please.
Yeah, I mean, you invited us to come in, and I was very interested by what Christopher said, both on the raw materials, of course, which is a very important issue, but also what you said earlier about investing in the US. I mean, that is very important, because what we see with the Biden administration is that there's clearly a re-engagement of the US in the decarbonization and and potentially a huge market for European companies. And the European Commission now is reflecting on defining a green tech alliance as a setup of a trade and technology council. We see a number of initiatives appearing to strengthen the collaboration with the US on different aspects of the green and digital transition. And you, as a manufacturer, what would you see would be absolutely needed at the European level to strengthen that collaboration and open new markets in the US that we could use? I mean, is it work on standardization that you see as a priority, or is it other forms of work? Is it simply networking, collaboration, a kind of business-to-business networking that needs to be fostered, or what else?
Vincent, I'm not at all on those aspects, at least in our pre-field in Europacable, because most of leading technology, for example, for carbon-free energy deployment, are European right now in the world. You are talking about wind offshore developer like Ørsted, European player, Equinor, European player. So, US is already asking a lot of European companies to support the Build Back Better plan. So the opportunity to grow in US is massive for European companies. What I want to make sure is that we safeguard capacity, resources for the European needs. That's more my point. To enhance our collaboration for US, I think it's working very, very well right now following President Biden election. But I want to make sure that we safeguard the capacity for European development. That were more my point. Mojca.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mojca, please.
Thank you. I would like to actually connect all the questions and statements from Tomás and my colleagues. What do we need to do to secure, Tomás, is Europe has done, I mean, it's an amazing job of what was done with also increasing the investments and everything. It has tripled. Yeah, it's beyond imaginary. Nobody believed it possible. But actually, if we look at the scientists, we would need to multiply by 5 the investments to be able to achieve the goals that we have set now to ourselves now, when we're already lowering the goals, not before when they were already higher. And the second thing what we need to start working on is starting to adapt to the new situations that will happen, and this is important very much for our industries as well. And there will be higher temperatures, there will be different flows of water, of pressure, of everything, droughts and floods and everything, and this does affect all of us, and also many other issues, and we need to start adopting. And the first thing of starting to adopting is to secure our own development of the technology, and building the resilience of Europe's industry and of Europe's technology and strategic autonomy. We are not in that good, we're in a good position regarding technology, and this is why we're talking about it, because we don't want to lose it. When we talk about our strategic position for the reach to the materials, that's another thing, that's another story. We were talking about copper, and imagine how things are looking in the context of other materials. There's a group of the critical materials, and some of them are going to, the use of them is multiplying by 50 times with the coming new technologies. And the issues that we now have in our supply chains I'm afraid, only the beginning of everything. This is why I want to say, and I want to stress once more, it's so important that we do keep our own technologies and that we do invest and that we do have a fair level playing field in our markets, because sometimes we're just too nice and too open for everything. Sorry, I was looking for the right word and did not want to be, you know, too harsh, but really.
Thank you, Mojca. One word that could be used, and I think here we'll be even quoting the European Commission, is that Europe has stopped or is stopping being naive when it comes to the way we are open, which is good, which is part of our DNA. But being open is one thing, being naive is another. And I think here I'm quoting some gentleman or lady that is at the top of the
president of the commission,
so,
I think.
Exactly. I wasn't sure it was the president or the vice president, but who has said that word. So that's good, and it's encouraging.
Tomás, so one word on my side, yeah.
Exactly.
T&D industry, I would say for some time, for some 1 decade more, if we want to sell in US or China, you need to design and manufacture in China, at least in our industry. Yeah? So in fact, the game for me is a bit different. In the past, of course, you could import, export, and no. For me, as far as we see in our industry, we believe in the Green Deal, and the clean energy package for us is a great opportunity to have the framework to be the first and to innovate, because it's easy to manage a factory. Yeah? You need to have a process efficient and the cost reduced every year, and you need to be differentiated to grab the market. Differentiated is about the Green Deal and the booster with all the market created by the recovery plan. The process is the eco-design, is the circular economy, all the structure where we imagine the service all along the life cycle. As soon as we are able to produce that and let's say to dispatch in Europe first, in fact, after we use our center, our logistics center in China, in US, in Russia, wherever, we adapt for the local market because the market is slightly different, but the basics, the mindset, circularity, manufacture, reuse, the green, how I optimize my CO2, etc., etc. We have the basics. So in fact, what we like in the Green Deal again and the clean energy package is that we have the framework to make our process evolving, and then we dispatch. So I believe we are not far, except that often a point is important is the timing. If you remember, of course, the famous PV story 20 years ago, the timing was wrong. We left China entering Europe before we were ready. EV, it's a bit different. It's the same for industry. The timing is important. And when I mentioned the timing, because of course there's market surveillance, but at the moment there's a CO2 price. Alors, CO2 price, tax, ETS, ETD, CBAM, all. So we should not be squeezed because Europe is in the world, and the timing should be really, the timeline should be really made that we have enough time to deploy what we have. And European finance taxonomy is a great deal. But for instance, T&D, all our equipment that we talk about the big group are not today in the European finance taxonomy. So we have an issue, because if we cannot declare in our industry the product that are green only because the column don't exist in the green taxonomy, but in fact, as I say, only political investment are not enough. You need the private industry investment. So we need we're explaining to European Commission for 1 year, and now we see some evolution, but we need the T&D industry and etc. being inside the taxonomy. Otherwise, will not follow. So I would say, let's be clear on the framework. Let's be clear on the timeline and the CO2, whatever is the CO2 tax, etc., incentive are important to secure the timeline. but after it, more or less, it's not so complicated.
Thank you, Yann. Looking at the time, which I need to keep, we have a minute left, and I would just wanted to give very quickly all of you maybe just a couple of sentences, words to conclude. I think there's a couple more questions, but I see them and they have been answered, partly answered actually by your statements, which I think have already also pointed towards the conclusions. But maybe just to ask you and to give a couple of bullet points, what is it what you would ask policymakers in the context of everything we have discussed today to do to support your industry, looking at the challenges, but also the opportunities in the future? Just maybe 2 bullet points from each to conclude, and then we will have to close the session. Starting with Mojca.
Okay. Not to look only at measures that are within possible to do within the existing administration and administrative boundaries of the possibilities of the European Commission, because the positive consequences, the positive effects of sorting out these issues are going to overweight all the inputs and investments that need to be done in order to resolve the issues that we ask for. Definitely.
Thank you, Mojca. Yann?
Yeah, maybe to avoid up and down, to have a clear midterm view, because in investment, in decision, in regulation, because otherwise the investor will hesitate to come. And maybe when creating some regulation, I'm thinking about the grid code, because you mentioned the smart grid. Of course, and so a European DSO entity are creating the codes, but the manufacturer, I believe, for instance, the stakeholder have to take part of the grid code. We cannot leave everything in the hand of the user, otherwise it's not so neutral, let's say. So let's ensure that on the critical things, looking at the smart building, at the smart meter also, we need to ensure that the rules for emergence of the prosumer are really neutral and all the stakeholders have a voice.
Thank you. Christopher.
I will say 3 words: simplify to amplify. Simplify the rules, regulation, processes, debates to amplify the impact and to foster our European leadership.
Thank you very much. Great conclusions. Thank you. And Vincent, thank you again for being with us. And if you also want to maybe have a last message you would like to share, please, floor is yours.
Just to thank you, Tomás, for inviting me to this session. I think it was very interesting to hear from industry. As far as I'm concerned, I've taken notes of all what you said. I mean, we noted earlier the difficulty of SMEs and companies in general to scale up in Europe, the importance of securing access to raw materials, and the issue of fair competition, which came very prominently in that webinar, which I noted on. This is an issue which definitely we will address in the next competitiveness progress report a little bit further in the action plan on digitalization of the energy system, but also, and even more importantly, together with our colleagues from that are responsible for industrial policy, competition policy, trade policy. I think it's a subject that come across different services in the Commission. So points taken, and let's stay in touch. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think everyone will be very happy to continue the dialogue. Thank you very much for attending. Thanks for the speakers, and have a good rest of the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.